Hey, eighth grade. I was just about to do a workout, but I got a message from Martin saying that he really wanted to hear some Yu Gi Oh! Pickup lines and jokes, and then he wanted to learn about First John chapter 1. So I decided to put my workout on hold and satisfy his request. So here we go. Here's a Yu Gi Oh! Pickup line. Hey, babe, are you the Millennium Puzzle? Because I think you're my destiny. It's a Yu-Gi-Oh one. Uh, here's a Death Note joke. What does light Yagami and an escalator have in common? They're both kinds of elevators. All right. You're welcome, Martin. So, First John chapter 1. Remember, quick review last week we talked about, or last time we talked about Gnostics, the identity of John, the Cerinthians, why John was writing his letter, right? Um, Basically, it's to encourage Christians to persevere in their faith and to point out the dangers and the errors of the false teachers, many of whom were the Cerinthians. So, um, and then we talked about the four main teachings in John, right? Being united to God or communion with God, communio, that is the main point of his letter. Also stresses the importance of faith in Jesus, in caritas, which is a word where we get the word charity from, right? It's a Latin word for love. It refers to Christian love specifically, love of God and love of your neighbor because of your love for God. And of course, divine filiation, which is the teaching that a Christian is a child of God. All right, so we're going to start with First John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. So there's a lot here on this slide. I just copied and pasted First John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. This is the prologue of the first letter of John. And if you remember way back to, I think it was last year when we did um, John's Gospel also has a prologue. And if you were to compare the two prologues, you would see that they are very similar to each other. So, what John writes at the beginning of his gospel is very similar to what John writes at the beginning of his letter, right? And I put words in bold that are similar in both, right? But basically, the idea in John's prologue for both his gospel and his letter is that in the beginning was the Word, right? And who is the Word? The Word is the second person of the Trinity, right? God the Son. And this God the Son incarnates. That means he takes on flesh. He becomes matter, right? Not pure spirit anymore. Um, and he also refers to the fact that in taking on matter, this eternal Word forms a link or a bridge between God and man that makes it possible for us to be united to God. And then the prologue also talks about a contrast between light and darkness. So John is going to make a contrast between light and darkness throughout his letter. Okay. Chapter 1. What is meant when he refers to the Word? So he says, this is verses 1 through 2. That which was from the beginning, the life was made manifest, and we saw it, and we testify to it. All right, so when he talks about the Word, he's talking, of course, about the second person of the Trinity, who incarnates as Jesus Christ in his mother's womb. And then what does he mean when he says the life was made manifest and we saw it and testify to it? Well, John is saying that the apostles are in a unique position among all human beings because these 12 apostles were personally witnesses to everything that everything that Jesus did, right? So they are eyewitnesses to it. And they have authority through Christ to testify to what they have seen, right? So they have apostolic authority, right? Which is similar to what, it's the same as what our bishops have in the Catholic Church. Just a second. My dad's here making dinner. I don't want to eat dinner, but I haven't told him that. I don't want him to know that I don't want to eat his dinner. Shh. Okay. Yeah, that was my dad. Where was I? Oh, yes. The apostles talk about the importance of unifying themselves to the apostles. And how do we do that? We unify ourselves through the church, because the apostles have been dead for 1900 years, right? So just like Christ is the bridge between God and man, the apostles, in a way, in a limited way, form a bridge between Christ and man, right? Okay, God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. So light and darkness help us understand God's nature and the way he reveals himself to us. So Gnostics think that light and darkness represent a battle between good and evil. And these are like two competing forces that are always in conflict with each other. But that is not a Christian perspective, right? We don't believe that like there's this evil force and this good force in the universe and they clash all the time, right? That's more of a pagan idea, right? So we reject this, but Gnostics believe it. Instead, the correct way to interpret it is light represents God and his revelation to us. Darkness represents sin, which is the absence of God. So darkness, in this case, does not represent a thing or a force. It just represents the absence of God, right? So in order to be in God's light, we have to live moral lives free from sin. Okay, last slide, slide 10. If we say we have fellowship with him while we walk in darkness, we lie. If we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves. If we say we have not sinned, we make him a liar. All right, so here John is critiquing false teachers who claim one of these three things. They either claim they are united to Christ despite living sinful lives. So this is the idea that you can live a very sinful life, but as long as you have a good personal relationship with Jesus, you're good, right? John rejects that. He also rejects the idea that there are certain people who never sin or have never sinned, right? So some of these false teachers are saying that they have special knowledge of God and therefore their actions are not sinful, or they've never sinned ever, right? And both the Old Testament and New Testament are very clear that everyone is a sinner. Of course, the Blessed Mother isn't, because she was preserved from original sin. And it's very important that we recognize that we are sinners, right? Because if you don't recognize that you're a sinner, if you deny the fact that you're a sinner, if you think you're just fine and you don't commit sins, then you're not going to be able to repent, right? It's a form of pride to believe you are not a sinner. You have to repent. You have to humble yourself before God, acknowledge your sinful nature in order to repent, in order to have communion with God. All right, so that's it for chapter 1. We will do chapter 2